Picture this: March 18th, 978 CE, Corfe Castle in Dorset, England. A 15-year-old boy rides up to his stepmother's fortress on a spring afternoon. King Edward, they'll call him, the martyr after his death. But right now, he's just a teenager who's been wearing England's crown for 3 years, since his father Edgar died suddenly in 975. He's thirsty after the journey from his court at Wareham. He's looking forward to wine, family conversation, maybe staying the night before riding back. He has no reason to suspect anything. This is family. This is his father's widow, Elf. This is his half-brother Ethelred's home. According to the life of St. Oswald, written within decades by monks who interviewed witnesses, Edward arrives in late afternoon expecting standard family hospitality. What Edward doesn't understand is that his stepmother has been planning this exact moment for 3 years, ever since the day her 7-year-old son lost the succession dispute, and Edward took the crown she believed belonged to her child. Medieval protocol dictates Edward remains mounted until formally welcomed by his host. Elfrith appears at the castle entrance. She smiles. She offers him a cup of wine, standard hospitality for a visiting king. Edward drinks while still on horseback, following proper protocol. What Edward doesn't see: servants emerging from the doorway behind. What he doesn't hear: the whispered signal. What he doesn't expect: hands grabbing his arm. As the wine cup touches his lips, a servant seizes his wrist with brutal force. Another drives a knife into his back between his ribs, tearing through muscle, possibly piercing his lung. The pain is instant, searing, incomprehensible. The wine cup falls from nerveless fingers. Blood spreads across the back of his royal tunic, dark, spreading, undeniable. Edward screams. He's been stabbed by his family servants. At his stepmother's command, his body reacts before his mind can fully process the betrayal. Escape, survive, get away from this place. He tries to spur his horse forward, but his hands can't grip the reins properly. Blood loss, shock spreading through his system. The world blurs at the edges. His fingers slip. His legs lose their grip on the saddle. He slides sideways. Consciousness fragment. The horse, smelling blood, hearing screams, feeling its rider's weight shift, wrong bolts in panic, thundering away from the castle at full gallop. Edward falls. One foot catches in the stirrup. Now imagine what happens next. You're 15 years old. You've just been stabbed in the back by your own family's servants. You're being dragged across rough ground at a full gallop, your body bouncing and slamming against rocks, exposed roots, every rut in the forest road. Every impact drives the knife wound deeper, tears it wider. The ground rips skin from your arms, your legs, your face. Sharp stones slash open your scalp. Your chest keeps slamming into protruding rocks. Ribs crack with sounds like dry wood snapping. You try to free your foot, but you're too weak from blood loss. You can't breathe properly. Each gasp brings liquid into your throat as the punctured lung fills with blood. You can't think clearly anymore. The world is just pain and motion, and the terrible understanding that you're dying and no one is coming to help. Your stepmother stands at the castle entrance watching. Your half-brother hides inside, probably already being fitted for your crown. The servants who stabbed you have returned to their duties. According to the life of St. Oswald, the horse dragged Edward's body for approximately 3 miles across rocky ground before his foot finally tore free from the stirrup. Modern historians examining contemporary accounts believe Edward remained conscious for at least part of the dragging, long enough to understand completely what had been done to him, long enough to realize his stepmother had ordered this, long enough to know he would never see another sunrise. Edward the Martyr, anointed King of England at age 12, murdered at age 15, dies alone on the rocks near Wareham. His body is found hours later by travelers who recognize the royal insignia on his torn, bloodied clothing. Here's the detail that reveals everything about Elfrith's calculation. She doesn't give Edward a royal burial befitting. His body is secretly dumped in a marsh near Wareham, hidden like a murdered peasant rather than honored like an anointed monarch. Within 3 months, her 7-year-old son Aethel is crowned King of England. Elfrith serves as regent, wielding the power she murdered to obtain. The servants who stabbed Edward rewarded with lands and positions at court, according to later chronicles. Official story released to the kingdom: tragic riding accident. The king's horse bolted unexpected. No one to blame, just terrible misfortune. But this first murder established the template that would be refined over 5 centuries. Kill the rival who threatens your preferred succession. Control the official story through institutional authority. Prosper from the murder while officially grieving the tragic accident. Edward the Martyr's murder in 978 proved something crucial to every ambitious noble watching. You could kill a crowned anointed king and get away with it if you controlled the narrative afterward. But that first assassination was crude, visible violence in a semi-public space. A knife wound that told the story even if chronicles lied. A body dragged for miles, leaving witnesses and evidence. The next generation of royal killers learned from those mistakes. They got more sophisticated. Jump forward 38 years. November 30th, 1016 CE. King Edmund II, called Ironside for his legendary strength in battle, has ruled England for exactly 7 months. He's 27 years old, a warrior in his absolute prime, who's fought the Danish invader Canute to a bloody stalemate across multiple brutal battles. They've just signed the Treaty of Olney, dividing England between them. Edmund gets Wessex in the south. Canute gets Mercia and Northumbria in the north. An uneasy peace after months of warfare that left thousands dead and the English countryside devastated. But here's what Edmund doesn't understand about Canute's character. Canute doesn't want half of England. He wants it all. And Edmund Ironside, young, strong, popular with his Saxon warriors, legitimate heir to the English throne, represents a permanent obstacle to complete Danish conquest. According to Henry of Huntingdon's Historia Anglorum, written in the 1130s based on earlier sources now lost, a conspirator named Edric Striona approaches Canute with a proposal. Edric is Edmund's own advisor, a man who'd switched sides multiple times during the war, a political survivor who understood his future lay with Danish victory. He offers Canute a solution to the Edmund problem. The method requires positioning an assassin not in a public space where witnesses might see, not in a bedroom where guards stand watch, but somewhere more private, more vulnerable, somewhere every king, no matter how strong, how guarded, how suspicious, must eventually go alone. The royal toilet. Medieval royal toilets weren't bathrooms as we understand them. They were small chambers with wooden seats positioned over deep stone pits, cesspits dropping straight down 30 feet into castle foundation. Dark, private, and architecturally accessible from below through the sewage channel. Picture the preparation. A man, possibly a Danish warrior, loyal to Canute, possibly one of Edric's hired killers, lowers himself into the cesspit beneath the royal toilet chamber. He stands there in human waste up to his chest, breathing the nauseating stench of raw sewage, holding a short blade, waiting in absolute darkness for hours, waiting for the king to need to relieve himself. Edmund enters the toilet chamber alone, as he's done hundreds of times before. He sits on the wooden seat, completely exposed, utterly defenseless, focused on the basic human necessity of relieving himself. His guards stand outside the door, giving him privacy. He suspects nothing. The killer strikes upward through the wooden seat with vicious, calculated force. The blade punches through the gap in the toilet seat and drives deep into Edmund's rectum, tearing through intestinal tissue, severing major blood vessels, causing catastrophic internal trauma. Edmund screams a sound of shock, agony, and instant understanding that he's been attacked in the most vulnerable moment imaginable. He tries to stand, but the damage is already done. Blood pours from the wound, spreading down his legs, pooling on the floor. Within minutes, shock sets in from massive blood loss and the introduction of a blade contaminated with human waste directly into his body cavity. Picture what this feels like. Searing pain in your lower abdomen, spreading like fire. Warm blood spreading down your legs, soaking through your clothing. The realization that you've been stabbed through the toilet seat while defecating. The humiliation compounding the physical agony. The knowledge that you're dying from a wound no physician can reach, no medieval medical treatment can address, in a manner so degrading that no chronicle will honestly describe it for over a century. Edmund calls for help. Guards burst in. They find their king bleeding from a wound they can barely comprehend, collapsing from shock and blood loss. Court physicians are summoned, but there's nothing they can do. The internal damage is catastrophic and unreachable. With medieval medical knowledge, the blade was contaminated with fecal matter, introducing massive bacterial infection directly into the abdominal cavity. Edmund dies within hours, possibly from exsanguination, possibly from the rapid onset of septic infection, possibly from both. The combination of massive internal bleeding and bacterial contamination from a feces-covered blade driving deep into his intestines makes survival impossible. Official story released to the kingdom. King Edmund died suddenly of disease. No details, no explanation, just vague reference to sudden illness that carried him off unexpectedly. But Henry of Huntingdon, writing over a century later when he could afford slightly more honesty, uses careful medieval euphemism. Edmund died from wounds inflicted in the most secret parts of his body. Code language that contemporary readers would understand meant something too degrading to state plainly that a warrior king who'd fought Canute across battlefields was stabbed through the rectum while sitting on a toilet. Within weeks of Edmund's death, Canute becomes sole ruler of all England. The Treaty of Olney is void. Danish conquest is complete. Edric Striona, the conspirator who arranged the toilet assassination, initially rewarded with lands and the earldom of Mercia, then executed by Canute the following year, possibly to eliminate a witness who knew too much. Notice the evolution. Edward's assassination required visible violence, leaving a body covered in evidence. Edmund's murder happens in absolute privacy, in a location so degrading that chroniclers won't describe it honestly for over a century, creating a death that looks like sudden natural illness with no suspicious circumstances anyone wants to investigate too closely. Jump forward 227 years. September 21st, 1327 CE. The method has evolved to something even more brutal. Symbolic torture designed to destroy the victim internally while leaving the external body pristine and unmarked for public viewing. Edward II, deposed by his wife Isabella and her lover Roger Mortimer in a coup that forced him to abdicate in favor of his teenage son, has been imprisoned at Berkeley Castle in Gloucestershire for months. He's 43 years old. He ruled England for 20 years before his wife invaded with a foreign army, forced him from the throne, and locked him away like a dangerous animal. The problem Isabella and Mortimer face is the eternal problem of successful coups. Edward is still alive, still breathing, still a potential rallying point for rebellion against the new regime. As long as the deposed king lives, someone might try to restore him, to use him as a figurehead for uprising, to challenge the legitimacy of his son's crown and Isabella's regency. Edward must die, but the execution must look natural. An obviously murdered king would create massive political problems, potential rebellion from nobles who fear they might be next, papal investigation into regicide, moral outrage that could destabilize the entire kingdom. For months, Edward's jailers have attempted to kill him through deprivation and environmental torture. According to chronicler Geoffrey Le Baker, writing around 1350 based on accounts from participants who later confessed, they kept Edward in a cell directly above a pit, filled with rotting animal carcasses. The stench was supposed to sicken him to death through disease and despair. It didn't work. Edward's body, though weakened by months of abuse, refused to die conveniently. They starved him intermittently, denied him heat during winter cold, subjected him to isolation and psychological torture. Edward survived it all. His constitution, strengthened by 20 years of medieval kingship, requiring physical resilience, wouldn't fail on schedule. On the night of September 21st, the jailers receive final orders from Mortimer. End this tonight. Now, men enter Edward's cell around midnight, likely including Thomas Gurney and John Maltravers, the knights specifically assigned to guard the deposed king. They carry specific tools prepared in advance, a wooden cattle horn, hollow and smooth, and a red-hot poker heated in the fireplace coals for hours until it glows white-hot in the darkness, radiating heat from 6 feet away. Picture what happens next. They force Edward face down on a wooden table. He's too weak from months of imprisonment, starvation, and abuse to fight effectively against multiple strong men. His screams are ignored, the castle walls are thick, the night is dark, guards have been cleared from nearby posts. The horn is inserted into his rectum, creating a channel that will theoretically prevent external burns that might be visible during the public viewing of his corpse that will follow. Then, as men hold him down with their full weight, pressing on his shoulders and legs, the poker, heated to temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, glowing white-hot like a piece of captured sun, is thrust through that horn deep into his bowels. The scream that tears from Edward's throat is documented by multiple sources. It's so piercing, so inhuman in its agony, so utterly unlike any sound a person normally makes, that villagers over a mile away bolt upright in their beds. Some thought they heard a demon. Others thought it was a woman being murdered. A few suspected the truth that someone in Berkeley Castle was dying in unimaginable agony. They were right. Picture what this does to a human body. The poker, glowing white-hot at over 1,000 degrees, instantly vaporizes tissue on contact. The thermal shock sends the body into violent convulsions. The pain is beyond anything the human nervous system is designed to process or communicate. Your internal organs are literally cooking. The smell of your own burning flesh fills your nostrils, a smell you recognize on some primal level as yourself being destroyed from the inside. You can't pass out. The pain is too intense, too overwhelming, too systemically catastrophic. Your body won't grant you the mercy of unconsciousness. You remain aware through all of it, minutes that feel like hours, as your intestines burn, your organs rupture. Your body goes into irreversible shock. Edward dies over the next 3 to 4 hours as his internal organs fail from massive thermal trauma. As infection sets in instantaneously from the cauterized tissue, and as his body succumbs to shock that no medieval medicine could treat. But here's the sophistication of the method, the reason it was specifically chosen. The next morning, when officials examine Edward's body to certify his death, he looks peaceful, unmarked, serene. The poker method left his external body completely pristine. No burns on his skin, no visible wounds, no marks of violence that might contradict the official story. All the catastrophic damage was internal, hidden from view. Official cause of death released to the kingdom: natural illness. The former king, weakened by months of melancholy and poor health following his abdication, simply died peacefully in his sleep. The method was deliberately chosen to symbolize Edward's alleged sins. Medieval moralists believed his close relationships with male favorites, Piers Gaveston, early in his reign, Hugh Despenser, later, were sodomitical transgressions against God and nature. His murderers killed him through penetration of that same site they considered sinful, making his death both execution and moral statement. Divine punishment enacted through human hands for crimes against natural order. Within days, Edward's body was displayed publicly at Gloucester Cathedral. Observers noted how peaceful he looked, how unmarked, how serene in death. No visible signs of violence, no indication of the hours of agony that preceded this peaceful appearance. The killers Thomas Gurney and John Maltravers fled England shortly after, suggesting they feared eventual retribution despite official sanction for their actions. Years later, when Edward III came of age and took power from his mother and Mortimer, he had Mortimer executed for multiple crimes, including probable involvement in his father's murder. But by then, the actual men who'd wielded the poker were long gone, their names known, but their bodies beyond reach of royal justice. The cycle of royal murder that began with Edward the Martyr's stabbing and dragging in 978 CE completes itself on a battlefield in 1485, with a king who possibly ordered children smothered dying, in a frenzy of blades wielded by men seeking revenge, power, and the right to write history. August 22, 1485 CE, Bosworth Field in Leicestershire. King Richard III, last Plantagenet King of England, possibly the man who ordered his 12-year-old and 9-year-old nephews murdered 2 years earlier, faces Henry Tudor's rebel army in a battle that will determine England's future dynasty. Richard is 32 years old. He's been king for 2 years since deposing his nephews and declaring them illegitimate. His reign has been controversial from the start, plagued by rumors about the disappeared princes, undermined by rebellions from former allies who switched sides to Henry Tudor, haunted by whispers that he's a usurper and child killer who stole his nephew's crown. Henry Tudor has landed in Wales with French mercenaries and attracted enough disaffected English nobles to pose a serious threat. But Richard still has advantages: more troops, better battlefield position, superior military experience from years of fighting in the Wars of the Roses. The battle rages for hours across muddy ground under an August sky. Richard's forces hold their position on Ambion Hill, the high ground giving them tactical advantage. The fighting is brutal, chaotic, medieval combat at its most savage, men hacking at each other with swords, maces, poleaxes, fighting in heavy armor under the summer sun, slipping in mud and blood. Then Richard sees something across the battlefield that makes him abandon all strategy for a desperate gamble. Henry Tudor's personal banner, the Red Dragon of Wales, surrounded by only a small group of bodyguards, separated from the main Tudor force by broken ground and the chaos of battle. Richard makes the decision that will cost him everything. He'll charge directly at Henry with a small group of elite mounted knights, trying to end the battle with one decisive strike: kill Henry Tudor personally, cut down their commander, win the war in one blow, break their will and send them fleeing. It almost works. Richard and his household knights, perhaps 20 to 30 heavily armored men on war horses, crash into Henry's position like an armored avalanche. Richard personally kills Henry's standard-bearer, William Brandon, with a single lance thrust that punches through his armor and chest. The Tudor banner falls to the mud. Richard fights to within feet of Henry himself, close enough that their eyes meet across the chaos, close enough to strike the killing blow that would end the rebellion instantly and secure Richard's crown. Then everything collapses. Henry's bodyguards close in, forming a defensive wall of poleaxes and swords. More Tudor soldiers rush to defend their commander, surrounding Richard's small force. Richard's gamble, brilliant if it had succeeded, has left him isolated, separated from his main army, surrounded by enemies who recognize the crowned king in their midst. His horse is cut down beneath him, multiple blades slashing at its legs, its flanks, hamstringing the animal. The horse screams and collapses, throwing Richard hard to the ground. His heavy armor protective when mounted, now a burden makes the impact brutal. Richard falls hard onto the muddy battlefield. He's on foot now, surrounded by enemies, separated from his army by hundreds of yards of chaotic combat, where no one can reach him in time to help. The butchery begins. Forensic analysis of Richard's skeleton discovered under a Leicester parking lot in 2012, in one of archaeology's most dramatic finds, reveals at least 11 wounds. 2 massive blows to the base of his skull, either one instantly fatal. A blade driven upward through the base of his skull from behind while he was on the ground. His face slashed open by a sword cut. His jaw broken, both arms showing defensive wounds where he tried desperately to block attacks coming from multiple directions. A mob of soldiers surrounding a fallen king, each man wanting to claim he struck the tyrant, each blow adding to the butchery. Picture the final moments. You're on the ground. Your horse is dead. Your helmet has been knocked off or torn away. Blades are coming from every direction. You raise your arms to block swords sliced through the flesh, cutting to bone. You try to stand, someone strikes the back of your head with devastating force. You collapse forward into the mud. Another blow to your skull. Then darkness. The men who killed Richard probably didn't know they were killing a king in those final moments. They saw an enemy knight on the ground, surrounded, defenseless. They killed him the way you kill any enemy in medieval warfare, quickly, brutally, with overwhelming force. Only after did they realize they'd just killed the King of England. They stripped Richard's body naked on the battlefield. Medieval custom allowed victors to claim the armor and weapons of the defeated. But stripping a king naked is deliberate humiliation. They throw his naked corpse across a horse. They parade it through Leicester like a piece of meat, letting crowds see the fallen tyrant reduced to nakedness and death. According to contemporary accounts, Richard's body was displayed publicly for several days to prove he was truly dead, to show that the Yorkist cause was finished, to demonstrate that Henry Tudor had won complete victory. The last Plantagenet king of England, the man who possibly ordered children smothered to secure his crown, who fought to the end, trying to kill his enemy personally, died in a swarm of blades from men who calculated that killing him meant victory, power, and the chance to tell history their way. Within weeks, Henry Tudor was crowned King Henry VII, founding the Tudor dynasty that would rule England for over a century. Richard's body was buried without ceremony in a Leicester church that was later demolished. His grave was lost for over 500 years, until archaeologists found his skeleton under a parking lot in 2012, the spine curved from scoliosis, the skull bearing the fatal wounds, the bones telling the story of a violent death that contemporary chronicles had described. The cycle completes. Kings murdered across 507 years, each death teaching the next generation that political threats must be eliminated. Each killing proving you can murder a king if you control what history remembers. English kings murdered across 5 centuries, each death more calculated than the last. From Edward the Martyr stabbed and dragged at 15 to Richard III butchered on Bosworth Field, the pattern stayed constant. Eliminate the rival, control the story, prosper from the murder. Dragged 3 miles, called an accident. Edmund, stabbed through a toilet, died of illness. Edward II, red-hot poker, no external marks. Richard III, hacked apart publicly. This wasn't divine right monarchy. This was systematic violence, hidden by institutional lies, proof you could murder kings if you controlled what history remembered. The only memorial that matters is truth. Uncomfortable, brutal, undeniable. Question everything you were taught. The official story is usually covering something up.